Okay. Um, so for my presentation for the EIS um, review was to critique the Topaz Solar Farm. Um, so let's get into it. So for this presentation, I wanted to review, like I said, the Topaz Solar Farm project and evaluate it through the lens of a social impact assessment. The Topaz Solar Farm is a large-scale utility solar development located in San Luis Obispo County, California. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but and the project underwent federal review through the NEPA environmental impact statement process. So my focus for this critique is specifically on how the assessment addresses environmental changes that may translate into social impacts, particularly those related to stormwater and hydrology. This topic particularly is relevant to me because I work as a stormwater engineer for the Ohio EPA Central Office Surface Water Division Stormwater Program. Within that role, currently I review stormwater pollution prevention plans, or SWIPs, and I evaluate stormwater management practices for construction projects in sensitive watersheds, those specifically being the Big Darby Creek and Olentangy River watersheds. So because of my background, I'm especially interested in how large-scale land disturbance, like what occurs during solar farm construction, can influence soil, compaction, erosion, infiltration rates, downstream water quality, and how these environmental changes can ultimately affect agricultural productivity, ecosystem health, and the community well-being overall. So why this case study? I selected it because of the utility scale solar development that's expanding rapidly across the United States. As renewable energy development increases, more large-scale solar projects are being constructed on previously agricultural land. So the Topaz Solar Farm covers roughly 3,500 acres of former ag land, which makes it a particularly useful case study for evaluating environmental and social impacts associated with land use change. Converting ag land to energy infrastructure introduces soil disturbance, changes to surface hydrology, and potential erosion risks. These types of environmental changes can have broader social implications. For example, altered runoff dynamics may affect water quality, downstream agricultural systems, or local ecosystem services. And this project provides a valuable opportunity to examine how these types of impacts are evaluated within the NEPA environmental impact statement framework and whether those impacts are effectively connected to social outcomes. So as an overview, the Topaz Solar Farm is a large photovoltaic solar energy facility with a generating capacity of approximately 550 megawatts. At the same time of its development, it was one of the largest solar farms in the world. The project occupies approximately 3,500 acres of land. And this land was previously used for agricultural purposes, meaning the project required a significant amount of land use conversion. The project was developed by First Solar through the Topaz Solar Farm LLC. Because of the scale of this project and the involvement of federal financing and regulatory oversight, the project requires a full environmental impact statement under NEPA. Large infrastructure projects like this often involve extensive land disturbance during construction, which raises important questions about the soil stability, hydrology, environmental impacts as a whole, that just overall may extend beyond the immediate project site itself. So the Topaz Solar Farm project was evaluated under NEPA. NEPA requires federal agencies to evaluate the environmental impacts of major federal actions before those actions are approved. One of the main tools used to meet this requirement is the Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS. That is the process that evaluates potential environmental and social impacts associated with a project and identifies possible mitigation measures. For the Topaz project, a draft environmental impact statement was released in 2011. The draft document provided it provided an opportunity for public review and comments, which is a key component for the NEPA process. Following the public comment period, a final EIS was released that incorporated responses to comments and refined impact analysis. And this process is designed to ensure transparency, public participation, and informed decision making. So the EIS itself relied on several different analytical methods to evaluate the potential impacts of the project. First off, the assessment included a baseline environmental characterization of the project area. So this means that the authors evaluated existing environmental conditions before the project would even occur. The report also included modeling and analysis of potential impacts to land use, hydrology, wildlife, habitat, and other environmental resources. These analyses attempted to predict how the environment could change as a result of the project. And in addition, the authors also conducted literature reviews and comparative analysis to help understand how similar projects have affected environmental systems in other locations. Public comment periods and agency consultations were also an important part of the process. These inputs were here to help identify potential concerns and improve the assessment. And then finally, the EIS developed mitigation measures intended to reduce environmental impacts during construction and operation. So one of the main findings of the EIS in this project involved the conversion of agricultural land into energy infrastructure. And this type of land use change can have significant environmental and social implications. So during construction, large areas of the soil must be disturbed in order to install solar panel arrays, access roads, and electrical infrastructure. This disturbance can lead to soil compaction, which may reduce infiltration and increase surface runoff. And then that increased runoff can raise concerns about erosion and sediment transport during rainfall events. And sediment transport is particularly important because it can degrade water quality and affect downstream ecosystems over time. From a social perspective, this project also introduces economic changes. So for example, construction activities may generate temporary employment and economic activity within the region, but at the same time, the reduction of agricultural land may also influence local agricultural productivity and land management practices as well. So the EIS was prepared by a multidisciplinary team of consultants and technical specialists. These teams typically included experts in the field such as ecology, hydrology, engineering, environmental planning. The involvement of these technical experts ensured that the assessment includes specific scientifically informed analysis of environmental impacts. The team also worked in coordination with federal and state regulatory agencies, which helps ensure that the assessment meets regulatory standards. However, when reviewing the list of preparers, it appears that most of the expertise represented is focused on environmental science and engineering. So while these fields are very critical, social impact assessment literature often emphasizes the importance of including social scientists, such as sociologists, anthropologists, community planners, and those all who specialize in evaluating social impacts. So the limited emphasis on social science expertise may partially explain why some of the social impact analysis in the EIS appears. In terms of data collection, the EIS includes a strong baseline of environmental data. The authors collected information about soil conditions, vegetation, habitat, wildlife, and other environmental variables in order to characterize the project area. The assessment also evaluates hydrologic and soil impacts at a general level, identifying potential erosion and runoff concerns associated with construction activities. However, the hydrologic analysis appears somewhat broad and does not fully explore long-term runoff dynamics after the project is installed. Additionally, the social impact analysis tends to focus primarily on economic indicators such as employment or economic activity rather than broader social variables. For example, there's relatively little discussion on how hydrologic changes could affect water quality, downstream agricultural productivity, or even ecosystem services that communities rely on. And then from a stormwater engineering perspective, incorporating more detailed hydrologic modeling and watershed level analysis could have strengthened the overall assessment too. And then public participation is important. It's an important component of the NEPA process. For this particular project, public involvement primarily occurred through the draft EIS statement comment period. During this process, members of the public, local organizations, and other stakeholders were able to review the draft and submit comments or concerns. These comments were then addressed in the final EIS through responses and revisions. And while this process does provide an opportunity for public input, it is largely procedural and occurs after much of the analysis has already been completed. The social impact assessment literature often recommends more proactive engagement with communities such as stakeholders, interviews, participatory planning. And these types of approaches can help ensure that local knowledge and community perspectives are incorporated earlier in the assessment process. And then the EIS proposes several mitigation measures intended to reduce environmental impacts associated with the project. During construction, erosion control and sediment management practices are implemented to minimize soil loss and protect water quality. Stormwater management practices such as erosion control BMPs and sediment basins are used to reduce the potential for sediment transport during rainfall events. This project also includes habitat conservation and vegetation management strategies intended to protect ecological resources. Monitoring programs are proposed to evaluate whether mitigation measures are functioning as intended. And if those monitoring results indicate that impacts are greater than expected, adaptive management strategies can be implemented to adjust mitigation approaches. So when evaluating the EIS against the social impact assessment principles, the report demonstrates several strengths, but limitations as well. So the document does a very strong job identifying environmental impacts and economic effects associated with the project. These impacts are clearly described and supported by environmental data. However, the connection between environmental changes and social outcomes could definitely be stronger. So, for example, the hydrologic changes such as altered runoff patterns or soil compaction, as discussed, they are discussed, but their potential implications for community well-being or downstream water quality are not explored enough in depth. Again, public participation is included through the NEPA comment process, but opportunities for deeper engagement with the local communities appear to be somewhat limited. Overall, though, the assessment addresses several core SIA or social impact assessment principles, but greater integration between environmental and social analysis would have strengthened the evaluation. So overall, the Topaz Solar Farm EIS provides a comprehensive environmental review that meets the requirements of the NEPA process. The document includes a strong technical analysis of environmental conditions, such as land use, wildlife habitat, and soil disturbance. However, from an SIA perspective, the analysis of social impact is somewhat limited. In particular, the report could more clearly connect environmental changes to potential social consequences, so such as hydrologic alterations, like we mentioned. For example, though, more discussion of water quality impacts agricultural productivity and ecosystem services could have helped better illustrate how environmental changes affect communities. And despite these limitations, the assessment still provides a solid example of how large-scale renewable energy projects are evaluated through the NEPA process. And based on these strengths and weaknesses, I would have to assign this particular project, the Topaz Solar Farm EIS, an overall grade of a B+. But yeah, that is all I had. I haven't finished the entire write-up of this critique of this environmental impact assessment for this project. So I'll go more in depth on how my perspective as someone who works for the Ohio EPA and someone who works in stormwater technical assistance. I'll dive deeper into that perspective more in the write-up, but this was just what I had overall. So thank you.